Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy. Perhaps now more than ever, your therapist needs therapy. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher. I am joined today by returning guest, Lilly Risch from Forward Healing Therapy. Lilly was one of my first 10 episodes for sure.
Yes. Hello. Good morning. It's great to be on.
It's been a minute. Lily's local. Lilly practices in the Milwaukee area as well. So she and I see each other somewhat regularly. So it's not like it's been over a year since she and I have talked, but it's been over a year since she's been on the podcast. She was graceful enough to join me this morning when I was like, hey, let's talk about how to survive in these tumultuous times. And Lilly was like, yes, let's talk about that. So Lilly, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Like a protected 30 minutes or however long we're going to talk today to just talk and process. I am in.
Yeah. And really, that's what we have to do as space holders and professionals right now.
Yes.
This is stuff we're talking about with our clients, but these are things that we have to implement in our own lives as well.
Yeah, because if not, I don't feel like if we don't have that space, that it comes into the therapy room. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Because we are humans kind of like in a human connection with our clients. And so sometimes there's this feeling, I don't know if you feel like this, Jeremy, but sometimes there's this feeling like a client's like bringing something up that like really resonates with me. And I feel my own stuff coming in and I'm like, oh, hold back, Lilly. Like, it's not about you in here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I tend to be, use self-disclosure a lot in therapy. I think it helps to normalize people's experiences, especially right now when people are coming in stressed, concerned about family members being deported, concerned about what lists they may be on that will be next on the administration's list. I've been sort of saying it's not even existential dread at this point. It's just sort of reality.
Yes, it is.
It's dreadful.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about, if it's okay, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you're navigating last week, not even, it feels like it's been a year of the new administration's kind of really concerning and, agenda. How have you been navigating what's been coming up for you?
Well, for me, I've had to practice what I preach, which is the limit my focus. Knowing this is a tactic amongst propagandists everywhere is this large sort of fire hose of information. They're going to throw a lot at people, try and overwhelm the system and sneak 3 or 4 really important things, which knowing Trump is enriching himself. That's the only thing he cares about in this presidency. But also, so, for me, that's been grounding in working with folks who are on the ground, who are in the community, who can help people. I'm a white male, so deportation's not a huge concern of mine, but that is a concern for people in the community and folks that I work with. So accumulating those resources and getting those connections going for folks who need to be in those connections. And then a community I am a part of the LGBTQ plus community, connecting with those folks and sort of prepping and planning for what might be coming next. I care deeply about climate change. I care deeply about a lot of what is under attack in this agenda, but I've sort of had to, for myself, try and focus on those 2 things right now as they seem most pressing. And I just don't have a ton of bandwidth for 40 other topics right now.
Well, that's kind of the space that I woke up in this morning. I saw something I've been on social media a lot in the last 2 days. I think last week I was I took a long break. And then this week I've been kind of diving in, which good and bad, right? Super updated, super updated today, or at least yesterday I was. It's hard to know what you get updated on, right? But really looking at, somebody was sharing about, there are so many things kind of that are being hit right now, and really working on niching down, what is your focus in that? So I was thinking that really resonates with me today, how you said that. about really working on focusing, like, what is it that I'm going to spend my energy in, because we only have a limited amount of it.
Yeah, and I think for clients, again, it turns, and for us as therapists too, but what I've been processing with clients a lot is like it just becomes so overwhelming so quickly that people sort of are dissociating and like not putting their energy towards anything, which feels very defeatist. And so trying to really, what do you need to stay informed on? What are you passionate about? What might you actually be able to take action on has been a good focal point for a lot of folks to not feel just sort of overwhelmed in the dread of it all.
The dread of it all is kind of a good way to put it, right?
Yeah.
And I, because it is so, it is so devastating, right? Kind of the blatant kind of attacks, right, on people that we love and care about, on even my marriage and myself, right, as a queer person, having a son of color as well, right? Like, I think, and I'm not just, I mean, I have a lot of privileges that a lot of other groups and people don't, and I recognize that. But it is just incredibly devastating, and I think dread is a good word, but it's hard, I think, in the therapeutic space it's hard to kind of work with my clients and our clients on, like, how do you stay above it, right? How do you not
Right.
get into the dread and then you can't show up
Yeah.
in your day to day?
Yeah. And I think part of what I talk a lot about in therapy anyways, in the best of times, is resource management. And like you said, like energy is not necessarily finite, but like we need to replenish it. It does run out.
Precious. It's precious.
Yeah.
I don't know if you like
and
what I do.
And time is the other resource that like people really are short on. And so trying to, again, like protect your energy. I think a lot of people struggled even during, a Biden administration to find that balance of like, I'm well informed and also not overwhelmed. Like that's a hard, and I think it's, again, on purpose, it's intentional. It's part of how propaganda works to overwhelm the system right now. But like, that's definitely taxing a lot of people's skill set on where your resources going, how much time, how much energy do you have for this? Doom scrolling for an hour before bed is probably not a good use of your time.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's such a hard balance, right? Like, it's such a hard balance, because I was talking to, somebody that I know in healthcare, and I was like, this week, especially with this whiplash of like, funding is frozen, funding isn't frozen. I work with compensation funding, and I'm like, does that mean that that funding is going to be impacted for clients that we see? Because that's federal funding, right? And that's just a piece of what I do, but I'm thinking about like my friends in healthcare. And so I sent a text out just in my, like, I kind of really just like fell into the panic of it and was like, federal funding is frozen, and just asked her. And she was like, wait, what? I haven't been paying attention to the news. Like you said, that's a good coping strategy, Lily. I'm like, just kidding. Pay attention this week. Like, and then the next day it's not, right? And so it's just so hard to know what is going to be impacted and what is it that we have to pay attention to without kind of falling into the crisis of it all. And I do completely recognize that I did a little bit of slipping into that this week, and really had to kind of ground myself and check myself with, like, hold up, like, focus on your day to day, focus on what's going on now, like, don't kind of spiral into all of it. So I don't know if you've experienced that too in the last week, but I was there yesterday.
Yeah, I think it ebbs and flows for sure. It's one of those things where I think another sort of mantra I've adopted has been like, it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint, especially for those of us.
Oh, I love it.
For those of us who have privilege, for those of us who are not facing deportation, who are unlikely to be sent to Guantanamo Bay anytime soon, like those of us who have some of that space need to have our communities, need to be investing in ourselves, not selfishly, not burying our heads in the sand, but to understand that like some of this stuff will get fought in court. Some of this stuff we will need to be calling and writing our representatives
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 months from now, not just right now, not just today. And so hydrating, trying to keep our
Totally.
sleep hygiene, like some of that stuff has been the messaging. I see people who are in crisis, and I also see people who do come to me with a lot of privilege and are sort of like, what do I do? I'm not directly affected, but like, obviously I care. And
Right.
so I think it's trying to figure out, like, realistically, where can we put some of that energy in a way where we're not just in this burnout cycle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's been something that I've just been thinking about, if it's okay if I kind of just bring up in terms of
Yeah.
and I think this is a kind of conversation that happens with some therapists that are on social media in talking about therapy being political, right? Or this conversation of, like, I think, sometimes when I bring up, right, issues that kind of are coming up now with the current administration, somebody might say to me, well, I don't like to talk about politics. And so for me, as a business owner as well, right, I have a group practice, and it's, I do want people to feel comfortable in my space. I also have a master's in social work, and we have a very clear code of ethics that says we will advocate for social justice, right? We will
Right.
respect the dignity and worth of each person. So I just wanted to bring it up because I think it's been interesting to just kind of think about, without judging therapists, but thinking about, like, how do we hold this space of advocating and also kind of running a business and having this conversation, right?
Yeah.
But what do you think?
I think therapy is political. I I think the profession is. I think, again, the idea that some of us may choose not to take insurance, and someone might be picking a therapist because it's all they can afford and they have Medicaid, and so that really limits who they can see. Like, it's
Right,
already political before people come into our office.
right,
Some clients may not want to talk politics, and again, like, as a therapist, I'm going to respect that. Like, I'm not pushing an agenda. I'm not trying to get them to agree with me politically, but to act like politics isn't affecting the process or isn't already in the room before we begin, I think is disingenuous.
yeah,
Um, and as owning my own practice, I tend to be pretty political. Like, my
yeah,
stuff's out there. Like, I'm posting about punching Nazis in the face. Like,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
who I am. That's who I'm
right,
working with. If you're, defending someone who owns a Nazi website and speaks at Nazi rallies and does a Nazi salute, like, we're probably not a good fit.
correct.
So don't work with me.
No, I'm completely with you, and I am completely aligned with what you're saying. And having two therapists that are in my group practice now, what I said let's do is, in the fall we kind of had a staff meeting and talked about values,
Yeah.
because I think we really, I'm really clear, and I have therapists that we have shared values, right? And I'm going to bring on therapists in my practice that have shared values, right? In terms
Mhm.
of, we are going to advocate for our clients who are trans. We are going to advocate for our clients, as much as we can, even though we don't, there are times that we can't see somebody because um, they don't have the financial privilege to be able to pay for it, right? It's just such a tricky and complex conversation. But at the end of the day, I will focus on values, and what's happening is, very clearly, what's happening politically is completely against, right,
Yeah.
those shared values, and that's where it, like you said, it does become political.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, then
and
I
we,
think
yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a big opinion of, I don't have a big head about it, but like, as business owners, our voice does matter somewhat. I obviously, Costco saying we're keeping DEI, it's important and we need it to be a successful business, gets
Yeah,
headlines in a way that solo practitioner Jeremy Schumacher thinks Nazis are bad, like, is never gonna, no one's reporting on that. Uh, but I think, again, like, for people who are looking for safe spaces, for people who are part of those marginalized communities, like, they want to work with someone who has values aligned with them. And so it's not just practicing what we preach and having our community be aligned, but also helping clients who might struggle to find a therapist they align with know, like, hey, this is a safe space. Like, even if you can't work with me for some reason, let me help you find someone who can. Or here's my social media, here's my YouTube, here's my podcast. Like,
yeah,
there are other ways that I can work with you or connect with you, even if you can't, see me in the office.
Absolutely. What you just said, I don't know if you felt like this, but I've sort of also felt like in this state of shock this week of what you just said, Nazis are bad. Why are we arguing about that? Like, why is this even a conversation or an argument that Nazis are bad, right? Like, this is, it almost feels like this, like, it feels very confusing, right? I think to a lot of people where, especially having somebody who was convicted of sexual offenses in power, and working with a lot of people who are survivors of sexual abuse, that in and of itself is completely minimizing, confusing, disorienting to survivors' experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've felt that even this week of being like, wait, what is happening? Why are we having it? Like, questioning yourself in a way because these people, right?
Well, and I think that's part of where, like, therapy is political. Like, for my own sanity, I've needed to post some things, to say some things out loud, just to be like,
yes,
hey, just so we're clear, like,
yes,
there's lots about Elon Musk being a Nazi before the salute, but like, that is indefensible at this point. I'm not interested in engaging in dialogue with anyone who wants to debate that, like, for my own sanity, because, I saw January 6th as an insurrection. I watched it happen live. I don't need to debate that with anyone. That's not a good use of my time or energy, and just crazy making.
completely.
So I think there's some, for me personally, there's been utility to post and comment on some of these things, just to, like, I'm a verbal processor. So to have something out loud or written in concrete words, not an abstract thought, helps me sort of solidify some of those thoughts. Just be like, hey, yeah, Nazis are bad. We should not tolerate them.
It's this whole name it to tame it. I love Dan Siegel's, what he talks about in terms of, and for those of you who don't know, Dan Siegel writes some great parenting books, No Drama Discipline. He just wrote one about adolescent. I haven't read that. I don't know if you have, Jeremy. But he talked about name it to tame it. So when kids are having kind of like a lot of emotions, or kind of what he calls downstairs brain and limbic system, lower part of brain, emotional brain, or we could call it, and kind of you see your child, like, I saw my 6-year-old have a meltdown on the floor this morning, right? You have to kind of work on regulating first and then naming it to tame it. So you're really upset because you want to wear different pants, and I said no because we're late for school. This literally happened this morning. I don't know if you can really.
Yes.
No, will help calm somebody down, right? To have them really understand, okay, this is what's happening in my emotional brain, versus like, you're not upset. It's not a big deal. Stop it, right? So I think of that when people are having, especially trauma survivors, are having like reactions or being triggered by somebody in being elected in a position of power who has, like I said, felonies and abused. I'm just talking about the sexual abuse piece of it, right?
Right.
To be able to like name it to tame it, as in like, no, your nervous system, you are actually feeling something that is real. This person has hurt women. This person is in a position of power. This feels bad, right? You feel bad because this is bad.
Right.
So yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot this week, and how sometimes we have to kind of like name it and say it as it is to really validate people's experience. That's, I think, exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. And, I work with religious trauma. And so a lot of Project 2025 is written by the Heritage Foundation, right-wing political think tank. And so for a lot of my ex-evangelical, a lot of ex-church folks that I work with, like, this feels a lot like being at a really bad church. Like, a church that has that cult of personality leader where the leader is doing bad things and people are lining up to protect the leader instead of protecting the victims. Like, this is how it plays out in abuse scandals in churches everywhere.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of those people, like, right, it's triggering. And when we talk about complex PTSD, it isn't any one singular trigger. It's sort of an environment of triggers.
Yep.
And that's can be really hard to navigate. And one of the things that, I was excited to talk with you about this morning, because you're part of my community, but also, like, I think that community piece is really important. And for some of our clients, where I think it's great to see, hey, connect with community, hey, spend your energy in your community. But for folks who don't have community, or whose communities are being affected or are less available than they used to be, like, this is, it's sort of, I would say, step one still is like, well, then let's build more communities. Let's find more communities. Let's connect to more communities. It is hard to get through tough times when you're on an island.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much. And that is exactly why I said, yeah, let's do this podcast today, Jeremy, because I was like, because you're part of my community. And I was like, I need to connect with people.
Right.
Right. Who are kind of navigating this space of showing up in a stable, right, way. And then having days like I had yesterday of a little bit of spiral. Right. And then getting out of it and being like, okay, like you said, hydrate. Texting I've texted my friends. So are we staying hydrated, friends?
Yeah.
Are we hydrated? Right. But I don't know if you saw that video of the caroling of the singing, like Sia outside of one of NDC. And then I like responded to it and I was like, I think that singing together and like caroling is such a healing way to connect with others. And it was just like a beautiful togetherness of people to see. So I would love to see something like that in Milwaukee at some point.
Yeah.
It'd be really cool.
Yes. Well, and again, like, some of this, connect to your community, have love, have joy. Like, it sounds almost cliche to say, like, that's part of resisting fascism, but like, I again, as a white person, like, the fascism I experience is different than someone who's, a black or brown person in America who's been like, oh yeah, we've been a fascist police state for a long time. Like, that's all I've ever known. And to still try and learn from those other cultures, learning from indigenous cultures who are dancing and having powwows and have ritual around grief and loss and like the struggle. And so trying to learn again, like, hey, white people, we don't need to figure this out. Other cultures have been doing this for a long time, better than we have.
Yes.
But I think it's one of those things where it's like, that grounds me in a way to say, like, there's still utility and hope and joy and having fun and putting energy towards some of that. Again, not in a bury your head sort of way, but in a, like, that is still what our life is about. That's still where we get meaning.
Absolutely. And that is also what I've brought into my parenting as well, because I don't know how, and we haven't talked about this a lot in the podcast, but just to kind of name it for the parents out there, I do, as a parent myself, feel like it's a tricky space as well to show up for your kids in this space where I think about their future. And I know that's what parents are thinking about, right? But still trying to, of course, hold hope for them and their generation and believe in them. And yeah, like you said, find that joy and find that togetherness and dance in the kitchen with them and go on hikes with them and whatever it kind of looks like for us. But it can be a tricky space to hold sometimes.
Yeah. And I think I have a almost 7-year-old now and a 4-year-old, and they're incredibly grounding. We're not talking politics for the most part. Sometimes I have to explain things that are said at home that we maybe don't say at school. But they want to talk about swim lessons. They want to talk about what they made in their art class. Like, that's their daily life. That's their experience. And so trying to take care of myself enough to have energy to show up and meet them where they're at without bringing the dread along with it. Like, I think that's, again, really helpful. I had I don't know, talking about my own childhood, is there were issues, but like my experience was fairly idyllic and like, right, because I didn't know we were poor. I didn't know a lot of the things that my parents were struggling with.
Mhm.
I played with my Legos. I played with my siblings. So like trying to hold space for a lot of that stuff has been helpful for sure for me as a
Yeah,
parent to be like, hey, I'm going to learn from my kids instead of thinking I need to have answers right now.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's not in obviously conversation. It's just like I think it's just sometimes being a big feeler myself, right? It's hard. I always need to put my stuff aside, right? With
Yeah.
with the kids and with the clients and all of that. So that's why it's just so important to have spaces like this to just be able to feel it together, and name it
Yeah.
together. Hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's no like secret recipe, there's no special sauce. Like, we as therapists don't have our shit together either. We're dealing with our kids having breakdowns in the morning. We're breaking our own rules about staying off social media and all that stuff. Like, right? Like, this is hard. This is not an easy or fun time. Like, no one's getting it right, quote unquote, right all the time.
Absolutely. And it's a shared experience with our clients, just like COVID, for example,
Yeah.
right? Where versus the experiences clients come in with where we haven't experienced it. Like we're out of it. Maybe we can relate in a way, but like
Mhm.
this is their childhood, their life, their trauma, what they've experienced versus we're going through it together. And so I will name that to clients and say, this is a
Yeah.
shared experience. And I'm also kind of navigating it. And um, if they ask how I'm navigating it, I'll share, you know,
Yeah.
um, and kind
Yeah.
of bring, yeah.
How do you just say it's a shared experience, or do you have a term or a phrase you like to use?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do say it's a shared experience, and I think people obviously know that, and people do. I'm really open about my identity to my clients because it's really important that I am also feel emotionally safe in the room, right? So I'm
Yeah.
open your identity back to my clients. So some of them might say, I'm thinking about you and your family, or um, just thinking that, you might be impacted. And I say, thank you. That means a lot. And, know that I have my own support system and my supports, right? Because I think
Right.
a lot of people just feel like whether, I have to care give, right? I have to take care of
Right.
you. And so naming that, like, that's not, I have people that help me and take care of me. I have my own therapist. I have, community. I have
Right.
my family supports me. But just really naming like I'm experiencing it too, and this is
Mhm.
what I've been thinking about if they ask. How about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. I talk a lot about, again, just because of some of the nature of my work with religious trauma, like we talk about moral injury, and then sort of have shifted that to be like a cultural wound or a cultural injury that, like, right, we're all experiencing simultaneously.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it is different. COVID is a very recent example. I see a lot of millennials because I'm a millennial, and so we talk about 9/11, or we talk about Columbine as like some of those other things that, like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, everybody kind of went through at the same time and had to process it in real time. Like, so I think that that's helpful to people to have a framework to, like you said, name it and kind of be able to say, like, yeah, here's how I got through this other horrible thing that everyone went through in real time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, to name it, just like very fucked.
It's very fucked. Why are we even arguing about if we should have if like human rights? Why is there even an argument that Nazis are bad or Nazis aren't bad or who like it's just so fucked and it's scary.
Yeah,
Really
yeah.
scary.
So again, like, there's no landing place that I think there's no way for me to like put a bow on this episode and be like, and that's our nice hopeful take home, other than to say like, yeah, we have to have community in order to resist. Like
Yes.
that's how we get through this, is together. Of we've had shitty governments before. There have been fascist regimes before.
Yep.
And that's how you get through it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And finding your community, and it is out there. I think whether you can't find it in person, a lot of online spaces.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have any off the top of your head, but I think even just like meetups, I think that is something that we can do right now that we couldn't do during COVID. Well, we could do online, but not in person.
Yeah.
Is really connect in person. Whatever it is, it's not that we have to talk about this. It's even that we can just like go grab coffee at the lake or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Well, and again, some of like the joy, like go to a Bucks game, like if that's your jam, you know, like do some of those things, go see a concert. I agree. Like I think the online spaces are really wonderful. And for me personally, my focus has really shifted back to in person, just because I find I need that more right now.
Yep.
And that's time and nature, but also shared experiences. You know, I'm a sports person, so something like a sports game or a competition that I can participate in, like those things are really, that gives me an hour or two where my brain doesn't feel so on fire. And like, that's nice. That has utility. That's useful.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Brain on fire. It's a good way to say it sometimes.
Yeah. I experienced that anyway, just being a neurodivergent person, but yeah. So yeah, like
I say
like you
scrambled.
said, like you said, that community is out there again, whether it's a musical artist that you enjoy, like try and see them, connect with other people in that community who also enjoy that thing. You know, I know a lot of communities online, fans of podcasts, and like go join a Discord. Discord is weird and it's clunky, and if you're not tech savvy, it seems weird. Like, but you can figure it out.
Yep.
Go on Reddit and have an anonymous account. Like, do some
Yep.
of this stuff where you don't have to participate with the fascist social media companies, and connect with your community. Like, we can't be siloed because a lot of people own a lot of things and make it awful.
Well, and you can talk about this in therapy too, just to name that.
Yes, for sure.
Right. I've been checking in, right, with people, clients, and but I also think there maybe is I don't know, maybe there's a sense sometimes like, can I talk to you about this, right? And absolutely, you can talk to your therapist about what is going on in the world and how you're feeling about it. And if that's hard for you, then kind of notice what the therapeutic space feels like. Like I'm not saying get a new therapist, but just be curious about that, right? Be curious about why is it that I feel like I can't talk about this with my therapist?
You might need to get a new therapist. That is a potential outcome.
That is potential. Yes.
But yes, therapists are part of the community, and we want to be, again, like we're in this profession because it is meaningful to us to hold space for people.
And just to go back to, we do abide by certain kind of code of ethics and values, right, in our profession. Different of looking from, social worker to LPC, and they're very much aligned, I think, especially when we're talking about things like gender affirming care, right? What the mental health professional community says and so that is something to, I think, be curious about too. If you don't feel like you have a space to a therapeutic space that is supportive of your identity, then that's something to really do your research on and find a therapist where you are affirmed and you are supported.
Yeah. And again, some of that might need to be online spaces. I know, like for religious trauma, there's me. I think there's one person out in Madison right now who also works with religious trauma. But for a while, I was the only person in the state who had that specialty. Like, go online, find a support group, find peer connection, like talk to your therapist, yes, but also find your peers, build your community that way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Ugh, this has been grounding. And again, like I think trying to model we as therapists are people too, but also like these conversations aren't necessarily, there's no resolution. And I feel more grounded by having had the conversation.
Me too. That's the resolution for us, right? Like, it's not like how can we wrap this up in a nice little bow?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We're not overthrowing the government, but we are creating space and investing our own energy to get through the marathon of it.
It's incredibly grounding to talk to you. And I just really appreciate how you show up and you being a part of my community and kind of having this holding space for me today. I really appreciate it, Jeremy.
Yeah. I appreciate you on short notice being like, yes, let's process together.
I will always do it if I have the time.
Yes. So if people want to learn more about you, if people want to work with you, they want to check out some of the clinicians. The last time you were on the podcast, it was just you. So you've added some clinicians since then. If people want to learn about your practice, learn about who you've got in your community, where do they go? How do they find you?
Yep. forwardhealingtherapy.com. Or you can email me directly at hello@forwardhealingtherapy.com. We work with adults. We do EMDR. We do art therapy. We have a therapist here, Josie, that does art therapy and EMDR. And then we have a therapist that works with younger kids and does dyadic attachment-based therapy. And she is works with kind of infant mental health as well. And that's Megan. So you can email me. Like I said, you can go to our website, and then on Instagram, I'm at forward.healing.therapy.
Yep. Yes, we will have links in the show notes, so you can drop down, however you're listening to this podcast, drop down in the show notes and you'll find some links there.
Perfect.
Lily, thanks. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeremy.
And to all our wonderful listeners, thanks for tuning in again this week. We'll be back next week with another new episode. Take care, everyone.